I'm Dave Hegarty. So my colleague Dan Hixson, we've worked together many times over the last decade. And what we're going to do tonight is riff on the beginning of a longer story on how do you engage customers using technology and driving that with purpose. But tonight, maybe we start with a little history around the concept of empathy and compassion. Compassion for your colleagues, compassion for the consumer, and more importantly, I think some empathy and compassion around the idea of digital transformation. I don't know how you feel about Dan, but I think it's really interesting. People are coming to us with a lot of very tactical questions around how do I do this or that? And it seems they always end up last with how do I do this with the company I work with? Or how do I engage, right? So I think maybe we should talk our story about how do you help people on the delivery side do just that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that we find is, let's say the software is oversold, right? In terms of how independently it can operate. And what used to be getting lost in that, and what I think we've started to correct on, is that a person operates that software. I think the sensationalization of artificial intelligence and machine learning in our collective cognition broadly has hidden the fact that in a lot of cases those tools aren't very smart unless there are smart marketers behind them. And so the empathy and compassion is okay, we've purchased this tool that has really robust capabilities that either accelerate us, help us hockey stick, or help us hit some hypercritical business goal or KPI, but somebody has to operate it. So either do we even have people that know how to operate this tool, yes or no? And then is there a place that we can help hiring, sourcing candidates? But also, okay, we do have some people and they kind of look like who they need to be, but there's a distance to traverse between here and there, between those folks internally are the ones that can operate this particular solution. Not because they're, and here's the empathy part, not because they're not smart enough or capable enough, but they're busy. And skill acquisition takes time, and robust technology is complicated to use because it does a lot of things. So becoming a skilled operator of the technology takes time, and in a lot of cases, people don't have it. So the time that is. And so what can we do to help put our clients, and really the extension of that being their teams, on a trajectory to go from where they are now in terms of their capability of independently operating a new solution to then becoming the masters of it and actually feeding back and providing new and novel things that the technology can do that wasn't anticipated. Those are unrealized benefits, unexpected benefits that a marketer, a CMO, a CIO gets from a team that's well positioned to become experts in the tools they're using, that sometimes it does things, sometimes that people combined with the technology, given the time, space, and nurturing, do unique, interesting things that accelerate you beyond your goals that you didn't expect.
So you touched on the three main things for me there, which was this idea of the human resource and empathy towards the marketing operation individual. A person is not a traditional marketer from 1950 where they do one singular thing very well. They're a modern marketer, which means they probably do a right? They have a horizontal expertise going from traditional marketing creative to most likely some sort of specialty I see in digital. They might be a creative artist, they might be audio visual, but they might write copy. So to your point, they're being asked to do multiple things. They're creative people by nature, cool, but they only still have so many hours in a day. So this idea of staff augmentation, right? As you digitally transform and you bring scale, we as consultants can come and fit that gap. But it seems that we're still missing the point of like, well, that should have been properly planned out with the C level and the IT level and HR, right? Which is you didn't have a roadmap when you bought this software. You thought it would do magical things and things would work out. But now the individual marketing ops has 10 times more incoming leads. or has 1,000 more hits on the website per day. You know, those KPIs have suddenly met their goal, but it doesn't seem we haven't married the technical roadmap with the business roadmap, right? So I mean, I don't know if you're
and it seems like there's I would think for, and I'm not speaking about any particular client offhand. So just the idea of a client or a company that buys a piece of technology, right? Work with a vendor. It's okay. I've got this problem, right? And it's solved by this capability that's enabled by this technology, right? They've never done it before, and then we go, well, boy, they sure did do a crummy job planning out how they were going to use it. Of course they did. They never done it before,
right. Exactly.
And so, you know, you mentioned in terms of augmentation. That's where I think we've now I will think about particular clients where we've been helpful. Where a client said, "Well, we've never done this before. You guys do it all the time. What's around the corner, right? What should we be thinking about that we're not?" And you know, so it's start with the compassion, like, yeah, the plan for getting your current team scaled up in the technology and capability that's business critical that you've never done before, while you know, market dynamics put more pressure on their time than ever before. It wasn't perfect. It's okay. Things are going to change. Nothing's going to be perfect. You've never done it before, but we've done it before. We're here now. We're here to help, and we can identify how to get people on that growth plan, whether it's, you know, the folks you have now, helping them skill up, train up. We can come in, to your point, staff augment, cover the gap as a bridge, train the trainer, as it were, or even help identify what are the type of candidates you should bring in. Is this so novel and esoteric relative to your marketing team's core competency, or is it so bespoke and specialized that it makes sense just to bring in somebody else, and we can help sort that out?
Well, it's like,
have some compassion, right?
Right. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to this idea of, I think, as vendors, we have to be compassionate that over the last few years, life has been very difficult for people in all walks of life, for all walks of reason, right?
Does anybody now in 2022 feel like they're better at planning and forecasting things?
Well, right. I mean, that's exactly it. Is, I think there's a great opportunity, right? In that, in the sense, there's the cliche, you know, it's an Asian cuneiform character, I believe, for chaos, and it's supposed to be made up of two characters, opportunity and disaster.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, based on my observations, my own personal life, I think you've seen it, but like, you see what's going on now. People are looking at things much differently than they did years ago. Yeah. And they're being very cautious. And I think there's something said for that, right? We're slowing things down a little bit, but the businesses continue. Okay, so we're slowing things down. We want to make sure we're prepared. We want to make the right plan, but marketing is always on, right? So it's like, so how do you extend now? And this goes back to this idea of move to cloud. We'll use this, right? The people want to move their infrastructure to cloud, or they have an on-prem license that's coming to end of life and they want to move to cloud. Seems like a great idea. And we can build out typically a financial model on the software side, but it seems that organizations are still, they're aggressive, if you will, in that acquisition of the tool. But to your point, they still seem to be very hesitant for a variety of reasons, maybe not to pull the trigger, but you still have to have that staff layer scale, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to build marketing ops and make $1 million investment in a marketing cloud, you have to have, again, that operational team that's cross-functional, that can manage the platform internally, if nothing else, just keeping the lights on, right, Dan? I mean, that's the gap, but why don't you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody anticipates some, and rightfully so, some cost savings moving from like a prem or managed services environment to a cloud SaaS adjacent platform as a service adjacent environment. I think the mistake that a lot of organizations make is that they don't recognize that move to cloud is a proxy for larger changes that are happening in consumer demands, consumer behavior, and therefore the expected actions and performance and competencies of their marketing team. So if you say, I've got this staffing layer and they all look the same, it's the same number, and we're going to move to cloud, and okay, that should have a cost reduction. Should I reduce my staff?
Right.
No, that's not what that means. And I'm not trying to speak to anybody's staffing level relative to revenue and attributable KPIs and those sorts of things. But the move to cloud, virtual hardware enables a certain velocity of content and digital experiences across channels. So identification of customers coming in, and then the ability to message them in real time or near real time on a personal one-to-one basis. That the way that team works needs to change. You need a greater number of core content elements that can be represented and repurposed in that one-to-one space. So maybe it's the same staffing layer. You certainly, unless there are larger businesses, you certainly shouldn't be looking at reducing that staffing layer. Certainly changing the skill of those folks, or changing the emphasis where things might have been done from a process perspective to accommodate the fact that something's hooked up to a COBOL server from the 1970s or something like that in the back of the house. Yeah, you won't need to do that anymore. But moving to cloud enables things that are demanded of by consumers that your competitors are doing, that necessitate a change in how those marketing operations teams work. So it's an opportunity for reevaluation of the skill sets and increasing the number of those folks to rise to meet the challenge of marketing in an always-on environment to a customer that's always on and interacting with you very broadly.
So that seems to me the idea that people don't seem to understand that the move to cloud is a paradigm shift, cliche, forgive me, yeah. but it is. We're moving to this concept theoretically. Again, I'm going to quote a professor that I took, actually, Jeffrey Parker, right? His book, The Platform Revolution. And one of the things that was really profound about that book for me, Dan, was this idea that the business was changing, right? And the business was changing in the sense that, and there's a whole section where he talks about the idea where former competitors are now part of the ecosystem, and hence move to cloud. Because what does that mean for someone who doesn't understand what we're talking about in cloud? You're exposing, for instance, something like your point of sales transaction, or you're exposing something like the return of the vehicle from the rental fleet to a location that is not owned by your own. So let's imagine you rented a car in Boston and you drove it to San Diego and you dropped it off at a different dealer than when you got it from. The move to cloud concept allows those two disparate systems theoretically to connect and to facilitate that transaction, right?
And if you think about it, exposing that point of sale data, it's kind of like, at least the way I think about it, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these systems are trying to approximate human behavior, human intuition, things that are natural for us as people. It's like clienteling at scale, right? If you came into the restaurant or you came into the store every week and bought the same types of meals or purchased the same type of products, if you were interacting with one person, right? One waiter, one cook staff in the restaurant example, one cashier, or attendant in the shopping example, they would have an intuitive understanding of your wants, needs, desires, and would be able to anticipate something novel outside of that set that you might be interested in. And so, using your example of renting a car, it would be knowing me, anticipating me as though I always rented a car that week. I'm terrible with directions, so you should tell me about the GPS unit, and I'm very likely to buy it because I also know I'm terrible with directions, as an example.
Well, as your Irish bartender from Boston, I know you're an old-fashioned drinker with rye, so it's
already So yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll recommend something. We're not going to propose something
already made before you sat down.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what when we say the business is changing and now it's all part of the ecosystem, we're exposing that point of sale data. That's what it gives us.
Right.
It's the ability to clientele to be the bartender, the confidant, the consigliere at scale.
So this is where AI, by the way, for those who are listening, artificial intelligence, and at least for Dan and I, typically means some human wrote a note. And that artificial intelligence now has intelligence because someone gave it some instruction. Yeah. If you come from the city of Boston, show something related to Boston. As simple as that.
And just to be clear for folks, artificial intelligence left to its own devices doesn't look very intelligent at all. Right. As an example, let's say you're receiving emails from a brand, right? And it's a shoe brand. Let's make it up. It's a shoe brand, and you purchased a pair of basketball shoes, right? So you have a high propensity to buy more basketball shoes. The shoe brand if it just let artificial intelligence go nuts all on its own, would just show you an email that had, n number of pictures of the same set of basketball shoes. You just bought them. You're highly likely to buy these because we know you're likely to buy them. That's the sort of thing that artificial intelligence, absent human intervention, tends to do on its own. So, David, what you were saying is, I think, is something we try to counsel everybody on. Is you've got to give it some parameters. You've got to give artificial intelligence solutions some parameters to operate in, so it doesn't do stuff that seems highly unintelligent.
Well, so this now allows us to talk about a few things: compassion versus the creepy, right? And something very esoteric: artificial intelligence and machine learning. And lastly, bringing it back to what are we trying to accomplish? So what are we trying to accomplish with all of this discussion around empathy and business rules? The idea that business is trying to drive revenue through some personalized experience on some channel. It could be email, could be a social network, could be your on-set TV where you're watching Hulu, you log into Amazon Prime to watch something on your TV. Guess what? It's a connected device. We can drive programmatic media.
Got an IP address, we can drive media to it.
Exactly. So how do we help companies now, Dan, do that? First of all, have them understand that the website isn't the end all be all, that digital footprint, that digital experience now extends down for you and I, as an example, on a TV where we're watching an app, maybe a documentary or a crime show or whatever it might be, right? It could be a sporting event. But in my case, and probably in your case, it's probably streamed through an app on a TV. Okay, so you and I would call those computers. So how do we do that now where the artificial intelligence, the investment is articulated to business that says, if you only write this one rule every time Dave and Dan watch a show talk about IT, right? You're going to miss the point. You have to make the investments that human intervention can create, if you will, a dictionary, right? A whole customer journey with, if they do this and not that, and adding some layer of, at some point, stop. At some point, right? At some point, have some empathy that we've tried all of the personalized messages. Maybe let's say, because his birthday is next week, happy birthday and nothing else. I'm just using that as an example of a non-transactional, empathetic outreach that marketing could do, I think with great success, which is save the $1 million this month in advertising on some channel, and only send an email one time this month, and on their birthday, just say happy birthday to them.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to an equation from physics I like: pressure equals force over area. We can put the same amount of pressure by reducing the area and with the same amount of force. It is, and think about pressure as just being the impact of our marketing, right? If I don't hear from a brand for a month, in your example, and I get one email that says happy birthday, I'm probably more likely to read that than if I've been getting 5 emails from them a day, every day. Not that I'm going to name names. The other thing, and not to flip the bit and say, hey, we got to spend more money on more stuff, but in the same way that artificial intelligence approximating human intuition is useful for marketing, so going from the company out, it's useful for getting the data back in to figure out what happened, right? So if I've never heard of a product and I see a commercial about it, and then I go buy the product, human intuition tells us, well, if you never heard about it before and you saw the commercial and then you went to the store and you bought it, probably the case that we could attribute that purchase to seeing the commercial, because absent that commercial, you wouldn't even have known it existed. And it's true, I'm oblivious about a great many things. But in the customer journey is more complex, right? Where it's a combination of commercials, email marketing, awareness campaigns in digital media, personalized campaign on social, as an example. And so investing in some method of attributing what just happened and why it happened, and using artificial intelligence and machine learning to help determine that, I think is something that can go overlooked. We spend all the money on the AI to go out, to send messages out, but unless we're connected on when the data comes back in, it's hard to tell what worked and what didn't. And absent that, it makes it very difficult to continue to justify the investments, because if all we're looking at is top line revenue, there could be a whole sea change. The channel that was effective this quarter could be ineffective next quarter. But if we don't have the ability to use technology to intuit why what happened, our marketers and our folks are less likely to make the decisions that keep a client or keep a company successful over the long run.
Well, but that stitches it up to the strategic for me, which is we had this tactical thing. We're trying to sell something online, but we were pushing. We made an ad, they bought a TV in your case. IT is an enabler and happy because everything's done in this sort of platform based. They're not managing thousands of systems and hardware. They have now, right? Their hands are free of your day-to-day marketing operation interaction, buying the TV, but they had the systems in place that capture the transaction, the attributable data, lack of a better word, and the TV, and other things to say, no, you spent money on this advertisement. You asked me for a report. Here's an impression at home watching Vikings on Amazon or something, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. And now marketing says, thank you for the data, IT. Look, the report shows I attributed a spend to a transaction. Now, but it goes up to the idea, to your point now, to the C level, which is like, you're innovating. We started this whole conversation around, David and Dan's desire to fail spectacularly in life, because the greater the failure, the greater the learning curve. And that's how we both develop. If it's weightlifting, if it's diet, if it's marriage, whatever it might be in our life, we do it really well without fear, because now you can learn from it. But it seems that what you and I share in the sense of living a certain way in life, using 2 ears and 1 mouth in proportion, is almost lost on the people at that C level, which is digital transformation is really you taking a challenge on that you've never done before. But don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to fail, because you're innovating, and that is allowing you to, at the strategic level, differentiate, at the business level, allow you to scale, but at the tactical level, you're showing revenues growing. It might be slower, but it's going to probably at all 3 levels scale out if you give it time, right? Again, empathy.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that occasionally, and the goal should be that people using the technology end up, becoming very clever and doing things you didn't expect to achieve results you didn't have planned. And it speaks to the need for in the C-suite or whomever's making a decision about digital transformation to look at it as a series of bets, or what we'd call real options, the right but not the obligation to do something. You could think of it in terms of experiments. If we say, okay, we want to achieve a given outcome, and we're going to try 5 different things. Well, there's probably a few of them that we know are more likely to succeed than the others, but it's possible that they do. And the reward payoff is different, right? Higher likelihood of failure. We're only going to take that on if the potential reward justifies it. We do that expected value calculation. Higher. And so instead of thinking about digital transformation as something that is highly plannable to a degree of precision, it's something that is needs to respond to business challenges, because the digital transformation initiative is multiple years. Again, does anybody feel like we've gotten better at planning, predicting, forecasting things over the past few years? I don't. I haven't gotten better. I didn't see any of this coming. So it's having that high degree of optionality, having a bunch of experiments running, testing things, with the expectation that not all of them will work, means that if circumstances change drastically, something that in a prior set of circumstances wouldn't work could, in fact, in a new set of circumstances, be the thing that works, be the thing that makes up for the fact that the old ways stopped working. And then, that's what we try to counsel folks on in digital transformation, is whatever you think you can do right now, whatever you think you've got planned out, whatever the very well constructed PowerPoint slide says, that journey is going to be different than you planned it. So let's act accordingly.
So I mean, so I guess that's where we all have to take a step back. There's an unknown in this variable, which is time is moving at a far greater pace for all of us, like it or not. And that's where I'm learning to be more compassionate, empathetic. Is I've run out of time, and I'm like everyone, I'm putting all the time in, and I'm trying to figure out how do we find more time in the day. Well, there's only 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
right? So we have to now take a step back and say, well, all the things you're doing, if you're trying to train for any sort of sporting event, or if you're trying to read a book series, or if you're trying to walk a mile and you just started today, all of those things take time, but you have to start by little chunks.
Yeah.
And, you and I have spoken about it many times. There's a variety, especially in the Asian culture, the concept of, breaking things into even like 20-minute moments where you super hyper focus. And I think that's something we have to think about as well with digital transformation. It's not something is going to get done in a 20-minute focus block. It's going to be hundreds of these focus blocks. But if you slow it down and you look at the incremental progress, right? The C level, the tactical, the infrastructure platform organization, they can all see growth.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. It's almost like, how do you get the organization back to a flat structure so that people on one side understand what's going on the other, versus this idea that marketing ops is somehow, and I keep even doing it with my hands, somehow that marketing ops VP of email or that marketing ops VP of personalization is way down on the totem pole, probably the wrong term, but way down on the org chart, in the sense of communication daily with the person to the right of them who's actually managing the KPI of revenue.
Yeah.
Right?
And
this person is driving it. And like you said, it's like, it's an unbalanced, scale at that point.
Yeah, and that's really the challenge in these. So if we agree that having experiments, options, bets running as part of a digital transformation roadmap is more likely to be adaptive in 2022 and beyond than being rigid, you also need to know when things have stopped working. And that challenge really is that the folks that manage that roadmap in the C-suite, or at the vice president level, are further away from the effects of their decisions. So making sure that you have formal and informal information and communication pathways between the folks closest to the effects of the decision and the folks making the decision is how you know when something is or isn't working, and how you identify when, like the example I was using, an experiment test option that you thought had a low likelihood of succeeding. Well, guess what? Circumstances at the delivery endpoint, at the customer touch point, have changed, and now that option is in fact much better. If that never gets communicated to the person making the decisions, either formally or informally, then you won't know that you were doing the right thing. And isn't that terrifying to have the the answer to the problem right there, to have it working but not be able to detect it and act?
All right, that might be a good way to to close her out with this idea of, how do we now stitch this whole discussion around together of how do we personalize and grow the company into a platform, move to cloud and benefit from that? How do we properly communicate and build a plan so that all levels of the organization are in concert?
Yeah.
They may not be 100% at the table because it may not benefit them directly, or they may not be affected by it directly, but they need to be in that communication channel so that they can understand the benefits when needed, right?
Yeah.
And lastly, this idea of how do you, your last statement, how do you now deliver it and show it, right? And how do we at R2I think that's really where we come in, right? We drive that project management, we drive that strategy, we drive that staff aug with the implementation project. But then lastly, it's this idea of then giving you deliverables, showing you that progress chart, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a challenge for a lot of our clients, and something we advise on, especially in our analytics practice, where we say, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're gonna do this work, and then these things are going to take place. Customers of yours are going to interact with you in this way, and then we're going to get the data back, and it's going to go into a report that looks like this, and we're going to show that you achieved X, Y, or Z outcomes, or we'll show how we need to optimize. And then come to find out that the rest of the organization has different charts. So, this is a phrase from a not famous but very accomplished offensive line coach by the name of Dante Scarnecchia. We all need to see the field with the same set of eyes, and that it doesn't matter how sophisticated, it doesn't matter how much technology we've bought. If we don't see the field with the same set of eyes, we're all going to be running into each other. We're not going to be able to understand what's going on. So that's one of the first things that any company looking at one of these digital transformation initiatives, or even making a large software vendor product or platform license should consider is, are we all looking at the same charts? If we say something's successful because the data says so, are we all looking at the same reports? Do we have the same data feeding in, even if it's different reporting programs, so that we can see the field with the same set of eyes and say, yes, we've succeeded.
Well, I like it. Single set of eyes, single set of data, right? Singular view of the platform and the customer. Nice way to close out.